The server room hummed like a dying beast at 3:47 a.m. when Marcus Webb received the email that would change everything. His phone vibrated against the glass desk of his corner office at Vertex Capital, the notification cutting through the silence like a blade. He'd been staring at lines of code for 6 hours straight, debugging a minor latency issue that no one else could solve, because that's what he did. He solved problems that shouldn't exist, fixed systems that weren't supposed to break, and kept a $500 million trading empire running on infrastructure he'd built from nothing. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The email subject line was clinical: immediate termination notice, effective immediately. Marcus blinked twice, certain his exhaustion was playing tricks. He opened the message, and the words blurred together at first, then sharpened into brutal clarity. Terminated. Effective immediately. Security would escort him out at 8 a.m. Return all company property. His access credentials would be revoked by end of business day. No explanation. No phone call. No meeting with Richard Castellano, the CEO who'd once called Marcus the backbone of this company, at a board meeting. Just a sterile corporate execution delivered via Outlook. Marcus sat back in his Herman Miller chair, the same chair he'd sat in for 70-hour weeks over the past 4 years, building Vertex from a mid-tier trading firm into a powerhouse that processed over $2 billion in daily transactions. His platform, used proprietary algorithms he'd written in a caffeine-fueled haze during the first year, code so elegant and efficient that it could execute trades 0.003 seconds faster than anything else on the market. In high-frequency trading, 0.003 seconds was an eternity. It was the difference between millions in profit and catastrophic loss. He looked around his office, at the whiteboard covered in mathematical proofs, at the collection of energy drink cans forming a small aluminum mountain by the trash bin, at the framed photograph of his younger sister Maya at her college graduation. She'd called him her hero that day, said he was the reason she could afford to study engineering without drowning in debt. Marcus had worked every available hour, poured every ounce of his genius into Vertex, not just for the salary but for the pride of building something that mattered. His hands trembled as he picked up his phone and dialed Richard's number. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. He called Jennifer Huang, the CFO who'd approved his last 2 bonuses, with enthusiastic praise. Her phone rang 4 times, then disconnected. He tried David Okonkwo, the head of operations who'd literally hugged him last month when the platform processed a record-breaking day without a single glitch. No one answered. Marcus stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. The city lights sparkled against Puget Sound, and somewhere in that darkness, decisions had been made about his life, his career, his worth. Decisions made without him, without explanation, without the basic human decency of a conversation. His phone buzzed again. A text from Leo Park, one of the junior developers he'd mentored. "Dude, what's happening? They just told us you're gone. Is this real?" Marcus typed back. "Apparently. Do you know why?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "No one's saying anything, but there's a meeting at 9 a.m. All hands. Mandatory." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Not quite anger, not quite fear, but something darker and more complex. Betrayal had a weight to it, a physical presence that pressed against his lungs. He'd given Vertex everything. He'd turned down offers from Google, from Amazon, from hedge funds that would have doubled his salary, because Richard had looked him in the eye 4 years ago and said, "Build something revolutionary with me, Marcus. Not for the money, for the legacy." Legacy. The word tasted like ash now. He returned to his desk and opened his laptop, muscle memory guiding his fingers across the keyboard. He logged into the platform's back end, the digital heart of Vertex Capital's entire operation. Everything was there: the trading algorithms, the risk management protocols, the disaster recovery systems, the authentication layers, the API integrations with every major exchange from New York to Hong Kong. All of it built on architecture he'd designed. All of it held together by code only he truly understood. Marcus had documented everything, of course. He was meticulous that way, but documentation could only go so far. The platform was alive in a way that transcended technical specifications. It breathed with his logic, pulsed with his problem-solving instincts, adapted through fail-safes he'd embedded like hidden organs throughout the system. Other developers could maintain it, could make minor adjustments, could keep the lights on. But when something went catastrophically wrong, and in trading systems, catastrophe was always just one bad millisecond away, Marcus was the only one who could see the solution before the problem fully manifested. He pulled up the system logs, scanning through millions of transactions from the past 24 hours. Everything looked clean, perfect, even. The algorithms were performing at 99.97% efficiency, well above the industry standard. Client portfolios were thriving. Vertex was making money hand over fist, just as it had been since Marcus elevated the platform beyond anything their competitors could touch. So why fire the architect in the middle of the night? Marcus clicked through to the employee directory and noticed something that made his blood run cold. 3 new names had been added to the engineering team yesterday. Dr. Amanda Ramirez, listed as Chief Technology Officer. Beneath her, 2 senior engineers from Goldman Sachs, both with impressive credentials and salary ranges that made Marcus's compensation look modest. He'd been replaced before he'd even been fired. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't about performance or budget cuts or corporate restructuring. This was calculated. They'd hired his replacement, waited until she was on board, and then discarded him like outdated hardware. Marcus's phone rang, an unknown number. He answered without thinking. Mr. Webb. A woman's voice, professional and detached. This is Alice from Vertex HR. I'm calling to confirm you received the termination notice and to remind you that per your employment contract, all intellectual property developed during your tenure belongs to Vertex Capital. We'll need you to sign a non-compete agreement and NDA before final severance is processed. I want to speak with Richard, Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. Mr. Castellano is unavailable. All questions should be directed to. I built that platform from scratch. For years of my life. I deserve an explanation. There was a pause, and Marcus could hear the soft clacking of a keyboard. Your severance package is quite generous, Mr. Webb. 6 months' salary, continued health insurance, and a strong letter of recommendation. We suggest you review the documents carefully and sign by Monday. And if I don't? Another pause, longer this time. The offer expires Monday at 5 p.m. After that, standard termination policies apply. 2 weeks base salary. No additional benefits. Marcus laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even himself. You're threatening me? We're following standard corporate procedures. Have a good evening, Mr. Webb. The line went dead. Marcus set his phone down carefully, as if it might explode. His mind raced through possibilities, through scenarios, through the elegant logic trees that had always guided his problem-solving. They wanted him gone and silent. They wanted his knowledge without his presence. They wanted the platform he'd built to continue generating hundreds of millions in revenue while he became a footnote in Vertex's history. He thought about Maya, about the tuition payments he'd promised to continue covering. He thought about his aging parents in their small home in Tacoma, about the medical bills from his father's heart surgery last year. He thought about the mortgage on his condo, about the car payment, about the 1,000 financial obligations that made him vulnerable. They knew all of this, of course. HR knew everything. They'd calculated his silence down to the dollar. Marcus opened a new terminal window and typed a command he'd never thought he'd use. A diagnostic protocol he'd embedded deep in the platform's core during the first year, when he was paranoid about system failures and wanted a way to monitor everything from anywhere. It was a backdoor, technically, though Marcus had always thought of it as a safety valve. He'd never abused it, never even mentioned it in documentation because some tools were meant for emergencies only. The diagnostic loaded, showing him real-time data on every component of the trading platform. Everything was green. Everything was perfect. Everything was running exactly as he'd designed it to run. For now, Marcus stared at the screen, at the beautiful architecture he'd created, at the digital fortress that had made Richard Castellano wealthy beyond imagination. He thought about the email, about the midnight termination, about Dr. Amanda Ramirez, who would wake up Monday morning thinking she could simply step into his shoes and command a system she hadn't built, hadn't bled for, hadn't woven into existence through countless sleepless nights. He closed his laptop with a soft click. At 7:55 a.m., Marcus stood in the Vertex Capital lobby with a cardboard box containing his few personal items. The photo of Maya, a stress ball shaped like a brain that a colleague had given him as a joke, a coffee mug that read, "There's no place like 127001. Two security guards flanked him, professional and distant, as if he were a criminal rather than the person who'd built the company's crown jewel. Employees streamed past, some avoiding his eyes, others offering sympathetic nods. Leo Park stopped, looking like he wanted to say something, but one of the security guards stepped forward and Leo kept walking. Richard Castellano emerged from the elevator, phone pressed to his ear, designer suit immaculate. He glanced at Marcus, and for a brief moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt, perhaps, or calculation. Then he looked away and continued his conversation as if Marcus were invisible. The security guards escorted Marcus to his car, waited while he loaded the box into the trunk, and then returned to the building without a word. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, and wondered what came next. Marcus didn't go home. Instead, he drove to a coffee shop in Fremont, a neighborhood spot where he'd spent countless mornings in the early days of building the Vertex platform. The barista, a woman named Carmen with sleeve tattoos and a warm smile, recognized him immediately. "Marcus, long time no see. The usual?" He nodded, grateful for the normalcy of the interaction. Carmen made his Americano with the same care she always had, and Marcus found a table in the back corner where he could think without interruption. His laptop bag sat beside him, but he couldn't bring himself to open it yet. Instead, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through old messages, trying to piece together when exactly his value to Vertex had begun to diminish in Richard's eyes. 3 months ago, Richard had CC'd him on an email to the board. Marcus Webb remains our most valuable technical asset. His platform is not just our competitive advantage, it is our company. 2 months ago, Richard had personally approved Marcus's request for additional server infrastructure, praising his visionary approach to scalability. 6 weeks ago, Richard had seemed distracted during their weekly check-in, cutting the meeting short to take a call from potential investors. Marcus realized now that the investors had probably been recruiting Dr. Amanda Ramirez. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "Hey, just checking in. How's the big project going?" Maya didn't know yet. Marcus had always protected her from his work stress, had always been the stable older brother who had everything figured out. He typed back, "Going well. How are midterms treating you?" "Brutal but manageable. Your care package saved my life. Those study snacks are fueling me through thermodynamics hell." Marcus smiled despite everything. He'd sent Maya a box of her favorite granola bars and coffee pods 2 weeks ago, along with a handwritten note encouraging her to push through the difficult semester. She was excelling in her engineering program, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working part-time at the university library. She was going to be extraordinary, and Marcus had sacrificed everything to make sure she had that chance. Their parents had done their best, but his father's construction business had barely kept the family afloat. And when the heart attack came, medical debt had swallowed what little savings existed. Marcus had been 24 then, 2 years out of MIT with a computer science degree and enough natural talent to command serious money. He'd taken the first high-paying job he could find, sent money home religiously, and later helped Maya navigate college applications and financial aid. When Vertex Capital offered him equity in addition to salary, Marcus had seen it as the final piece of financial security his family needed. The stock options were supposed to vest fully next year, turning into a sum that would erase his parents' debt and fund Maya's graduate school dreams. Those options were worthless now. Terminated employees forfeited unvested equity. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd been counting on that money, had built plans around it, had promised his father they'd be okay. Now he was unemployed with a non-compete agreement hanging over his head like a guillotine. If he signed it, he'd be barred from working in high-frequency trading for 2 years, essentially his entire field of expertise. If he didn't sign it, he'd lose the severance package and likely face legal action. Carmen brought his coffee over personally, setting it down with a sympathetic look. "You okay? You look like you're processing something heavy." Marcus managed a weak smile. Just one of those days. More like one of those weeks, I'd guess. She pulled out the chair across from him. I'm on break for 10 minutes. Want to talk about it? There was something disarming about Carmen's directness. Marcus had been coming to this coffee shop since before Vertex, back when he was freelancing and taking whatever contracts he could find. Carmen had been a constant presence, always ready with good coffee and better conversation. I got fired, Marcus said, the words feeling strange on his tongue. From the job I thought was my life's work. Carmen whistled low. Vertex? Seriously? I thought you were running that place. Not running it. Just built the technology that generates all their money. The bitterness crept into his voice unbidden. And they fired you? That's insane. They hired someone new. Someone with better credentials, probably. Someone who won't ask difficult questions or push back on bad decisions. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, letting the warmth anchor him. The worst part is, they didn't even have the decency to tell me to my face. Just an email at 3 a.m. Carmen shook her head. That's cruel. After everything you've put into it. For years. 70-hour weeks. Holidays, weekends, birthdays. I missed my sister's college acceptance celebration because there was a critical bug that only I could fix. I missed my father's birthday dinner because the platform needed an emergency upgrade. Marcus stared into his cup. And now they're erasing me like I was never there. But the platform, can it run without you? That was the question, wasn't it? Marcus thought about the architecture he'd built, about the layers of complexity that even he sometimes struggled to navigate. He designed it to be robust, to handle failures gracefully, to adapt to changing market conditions. But he'd also designed it with himself as the ultimate failsafe, the human element that could intervene when the algorithms encountered scenarios outside their training parameters. Technically, yes, Marcus said slowly. The documentation is extensive. A competent team could maintain it. But, he paused, searching for the right words. There's a difference between maintaining a system and truly understanding it. The platform makes thousands of micro-decisions every second, and those decisions are based on logic trees I built intuitively, not always explicitly. When something goes wrong, really wrong, you need someone who can see the solution in the problem itself. And you're that someone. I was. Carmen's break ended, and she stood, squeezing Marcus's shoulder. For what it's worth, their loss is everyone else's gain. You'll land somewhere better. But would he? The non-compete clause would make it nearly impossible to work in his specialty. Tech companies talked. Word traveled fast. If Marcus fought Vertex legally, he'd be branded as difficult, as someone who burned bridges. If he signed quietly and took the severance, he'd have 6 months to reinvent himself professionally while watching his life's work generate profits for people who discarded him. Marcus opened his laptop and began drafting an email to his former team. He wanted to say something, to offer guidance, to at least ensure that Leo and the other junior developers had resources if things went wrong. But as he typed, he realized how futile it was. His email access had been terminated. His corporate credentials were dead. He was already a ghost. He deleted the draft and instead opened LinkedIn, updating his profile to open to new opportunities. Within minutes, his phone started buzzing with messages from recruiters, colleagues, and former classmates. Everyone wanted to know what happened, wanted to express sympathy, wanted to network. One message stood out, from a former MIT classmate named David Chun, who now ran a small fintech startup in San Francisco. Heard about Vertex, their loss. If you're interested in building something from scratch again, something that's yours this time, let's talk. We can't match your old salary, but we can offer real equity and actual appreciation. Marcus stared at the message. The offer was tempting, but California felt impossibly far away. His parents were here, Maya was at UW, his entire support system was rooted in Seattle. And beneath that practical concern lay something deeper: exhaustion. The thought of building another trading platform, of pouring himself into code and architecture and endless debugging sessions, made him want to sleep for a month. His phone rang. His mother. Marcus, honey, I just wanted to check in. Your father and I are heading to his cardiology appointment. And I thought I'd see if you wanted to join us for lunch after. Marcus's throat tightened. His mother had no idea what had happened. No idea that the financial stability her son had promised was suddenly uncertain. I can't today, Mom. Work is really busy. You work too hard, sweetheart. You need to take care of yourself. If only she knew. After hanging up, Marcus forced himself to confront the practical realities. His savings would cover maybe 3 months of expenses if he was careful. The severance would extend that to 9 months, but only if he signed away his right to compete in the industry he'd spent a decade mastering. He'd need to start job hunting immediately, but without the Vertex credential shining on his resume, without references from Richard or the executive team, his options would be limited. And then there was the platform itself. Marcus pulled up the diagnostic backdoor again, watching the real-time data stream across his screen. Everything was still running perfectly. The algorithms were executing trades with mechanical precision, the risk management systems were catching edge cases before they became problems, and the overall efficiency metrics were stellar. But Marcus knew something that Dr. Amanda Ramirez and her team didn't. The platform had dependencies built on his personal oversight. There were manual calibrations he performed weekly to account for market volatility patterns. There were safeguards that required human judgment to activate. There were edge cases in the code that he'd patched temporarily, planning to revisit when time allowed, but time had never allowed. The platform was a living system, and living systems needed care. Marcus had provided that care instinctively, often without realizing he was doing it. He'd log in at odd hours to adjust parameters, would catch anomalies in system logs that automated monitoring missed, would feel in his gut when something was slightly off even before the metrics showed problems. Without him, the platform would continue running. For a while. But eventually, inevitably, something would break in a way the new team wouldn't anticipate. And when it did, they'd realize too late that they'd fired the only person who could fix it. Marcus closed his laptop and left the coffee shop, Carmen waving goodbye from behind the counter. He drove aimlessly for a while, ending up at Discovery Park, staring out at the Puget Sound. The water was gray and choppy, mirroring his mood. His phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He answered, expecting another recruiter. Marcus Webb. A man's voice, gravelly and direct. Speaking. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm a partner at Brennan & Associates, an executive litigation firm. I represent several former Vertex Capital employees in wrongful termination cases. I'd like to speak with you about your recent dismissal. Marcus's pulse quickened. How did you get my number? Word travels fast in the Seattle tech scene. I understand you built the proprietary trading platform that Vertex depends on, and I understand they terminated you without cause just as your equity was about to vest. That pattern is familiar. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. What do you mean? You're the 4th senior technical employee Vertex has terminated in the past 18 months, all under similar circumstances. We believe Richard Castellano has been systematically replacing high-equity employees with cheaper alternatives to avoid paying out stock options. It's illegal, and we're building a class action lawsuit. Marcus's mind raced. A lawsuit would mean months, possibly years, of legal battles. It would mean burning bridges with Vertex permanently. It would mean risking what little severance he'd been offered. But it would also mean fighting back. I need to think about it, Marcus said. Take your time. But Mr. Webb, that platform you built, they're going to struggle without you. And when they do, you'll have leverage you don't have right now. Call me when you're ready to discuss your options. The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at his phone with a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Marcus woke at 5 a.m., his body still programmed to the Vertex schedule despite having nowhere to go. He made coffee, opened his laptop, and found himself instinctively checking the platform's back end through his diagnostic access. What he saw made his blood run cold. The trading volume had spiked overnight, normal for Monday openings, but the efficiency metrics were off. Not catastrophically, but enough that Marcus noticed immediately. The average execution time had increased from 0.003 seconds to 0.008 seconds. In high-frequency trading, that 5-millisecond difference was massive. Someone had modified the core algorithm. Marcus dug deeper, pulling up the change logs. Dr. Amanda Ramirez had implemented an optimization on Saturday afternoon, adjusting the risk calculation parameters. On paper, it looked reasonable, a slight modification that should have improved performance. But Marcus could see what she'd missed. The change had created a cascading delay in how the system prioritized orders during high-volume periods. It was the kind of mistake someone would make if they understood the theory but not the practical implementation, if they'd read the documentation but hadn't lived with the system's quirks and personality. Marcus's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He could fix it in 10 minutes. A simple rollback and parameter adjustment, and the platform would be back to optimal performance. But he wasn't an employee anymore. He had no authorization to access these systems. Technically, he was using a backdoor that violated his termination agreement. He closed the laptop and tried to focus on his job search instead. By Tuesday evening, the efficiency had degraded further. Execution times were now averaging 0.012 seconds. Marcus watched through his diagnostic access as the platform struggled during the New York market close, saw orders queuing up in ways that should never happen, saw the algorithms making suboptimal decisions because they were operating on delayed data. He checked Vertex's public-facing metrics, the ones clients could see, and noticed the company had temporarily disabled real-time performance reporting. That was a red flag. They were hiding the problems. Marcus's phone rang. Leo Park, calling from a personal number. Marcus, thank God. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Leo? What's wrong? Everything. Leo's voice was strained, exhausted. Dr. Ramirez is insisting her modifications are improvements, but we're seeing latency issues across the board. I tried to roll back to your original parameters, but she blocked it. Said we needed to evolve beyond the original architecture, and that you'd built in unnecessary conservative buffers. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. Those buffers weren't conservative. They were calculated safeguards based on market chaos patterns. Did she run stress tests before implementing the changes? She said stress tests were unnecessary because the math was sound. The math is always sound until it meets reality. Marcus paced his apartment. What about the risk management protocols? Are they still functioning correctly? Honestly, I don't know. The monitoring dashboard looks green, but I don't trust it anymore. Some of the alerts you set up have been disabled because they were triggering too frequently. They triggered frequently because they were catching edge cases before they became problems. Marcus's voice rose. Leo, you need to tell Richard. If this continues, Richard knows. He doesn't care. Or rather, he cares more about proving they don't need you than about the actual performance metrics. There's this ego thing happening. Dr. Ramirez came from Goldman, and she's got Richard convinced that your approach was talented amateur hour compared to her institutional expertise. Marcus laughed bitterly. Talented amateur hour generated them $500 million. I know. We all know. But they're not listening. Leo paused. I'm calling because I wanted to warn you. There's talk about legal action. Some of the execs think you sabotaged the system before you left. What? I didn't touch anything. I know that, but the timing looks suspicious to them. You get fired Friday, performance degrades by Monday. They're connecting dots that don't exist. Marcus felt panic rising. If Vertex accused him of sabotage, his career was over. No company would hire him. The non-compete would be the least of his problems. Leo, listen carefully. I haven't sabotaged anything. The performance issues are because Dr. Ramirez doesn't understand the system architecture. She's making changes that seem logical in isolation but break the interdependencies I built in. I believe you, but I'm just a junior dev. Nobody listens to me. Can you document the changes? Show exactly what was modified and when. I can try, but my access has been restricted. Dr. Ramirez is controlling who can view the change logs now. After the call ended, Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at his laptop. He thought about Thomas Brennan's offer, about the lawsuit, about the leverage of watching Vertex crumble. But he also thought about the clients whose money was being traded through that platform, about the pension funds and retirement accounts and small investors who had no idea their assets were being processed through increasingly unstable systems. Wednesday brought catastrophe. Marcus woke to 17 missed calls and a news alert on his phone. Vertex Capital experiences major trading glitch. Clients report losses. He rushed to his laptop, pulling up the platform diagnostics. What he saw was worse than he'd imagined. During the Asian market session, the algorithms had entered a feedback loop, executing and re-executing the same trades in a pattern that resembled what traders called a flash crash spiral. The risk management systems that should have caught it had been disabled because they'd been flagging Dr. Ramirez's modifications as problematic. Vertex had lost $47 million in 3 hours. Marcus's phone exploded with calls. Unknown numbers, blocked numbers, journalists, former colleagues. He ignored them all except one, Richard Castellano. Marcus. Richard's voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Do you? Because last time we needed to talk, you sent me a termination email at 3 a.m. This isn't the time for wounded pride. We have a serious problem, and we need your help. Marcus let the silence stretch, savoring the power shift. I'm not an employee anymore, Richard. Remember, we'll reinstate you. Full salary, equity restored, public apology. Whatever you want. What I want is an explanation. Why did you fire me? Richard sighed, and Marcus could hear the exhaustion in it. Dr. Ramirez came highly recommended. Goldman was paying her 3 times what we were paying you. When she said she could optimize the platform and reduce our dependency on any single employee, the board was enthusiastic. They saw it as risk management. So you made me the risk. I made a business decision that turned out to be wrong. I'm admitting that. Now help us fix this before we lose everything. Marcus thought about the clients, about the money still being traded through his broken system. He thought about his own principles, about the code of ethics he'd always tried to uphold. He thought about revenge. I'll consult, Marcus said finally. Not as an employee, as an independent contractor. My rate is $5,000 an hour, 24-hour minimum commitment. Payment up front. And I want a written apology from you, personally, admitting that my termination was unjustified and that my work was essential to Vertex's success. That's extortion. That's the market rate for fixing catastrophes that shouldn't have happened. Take it or leave it. Richard took it. By Thursday afternoon, Marcus was back in the Vertex offices, but everything had changed. He wasn't escorted by security guards this time. He was met by a nervous administrative assistant who'd been assigned to cater to his every need. His old office had been given to someone else. So they set him up in the executive conference room with 3 monitors and unlimited access. Dr. Amanda Ramirez was nowhere to be seen. According to Leo, she'd been placed on administrative leave pending review. Marcus dove into the code, and what he found was worse than the diagnostics had shown. Dr. Ramirez hadn't just modified parameters. She'd attempted to refactor entire sections of the core algorithm, replacing his carefully balanced logic with textbook implementations that looked elegant but lacked the hardened, battle-tested resilience his original code possessed. It was like watching someone replace a Formula One engine with parts from an automotive engineering textbook. Theoretically correct but practically disastrous. Marcus worked 18 straight hours, methodically rolling back changes, restoring safeguards, and rebuilding the protective layers that Dr. Ramirez had stripped away in her quest for optimization. He found Leo and 2 other developers he trusted, walked them through what had gone wrong, and taught them how to spot the early warning signs of system degradation. The platform isn't just code, Marcus explained at 2 a.m., his voice hoarse from explaining concepts for the 10th time. It's a living system that adapts to market conditions. You can't treat it like a static program. You have to feel it, understand its rhythms, know when it's healthy and when it's struggling. Leo nodded, taking notes furiously. Dr. Ramirez kept talking about removing your idiosyncrasies from the code. She said proper engineering shouldn't depend on intuition. She's not wrong in principle, But she applied that philosophy to a system that was explicitly designed to be intuitive, to respond to patterns that can't always be quantified. That's what made it better than everything else on the market. By Friday morning, the platform was stable again. The execution times were back to 0.003 seconds. The risk management systems were functioning. The clients were cautiously optimistic. Vertex Capital had survived. Richard called Marcus into his office, looking 10 years older than he had the previous week. "You saved us," Richard said simply. "I fixed the problems created by the person you hired to replace me," Marcus corrected. Richard winced but nodded. "Fair. What happens now?" Marcus pulled out a document he'd prepared. Not a legal contract, but a personal agreement. "I'm not coming back as an employee. I'm done with Vertex. But I'll consult on a retainer basis to ensure the platform stays stable while you find someone who can actually maintain it. Not someone from Goldman or Morgan Stanley or any other prestigious firm. Someone hungry, someone young, someone who understands that the best code isn't always the prettiest code. And your equity? Already vested, according to the paperwork your lawyers drew up yesterday. Non-negotiable." Richard signed without argument. Marcus left Vertex Capital for the second time in a week, but this time he walked out with his head high. He'd proven his worth, secured his financial future, and exposed the arrogance of a system that thought credentials mattered more than competence. But he'd also learned something darker about himself. There had been a moment, during those first days after his firing, when he'd considered letting Vertex fail. When he'd imagined the satisfaction of watching them crumble without him. He hadn't done it. His ethics had prevailed, but the temptation had been real. That scared him more than anything else. 3 months later, Marcus sat in a different coffee shop, Carmen's Place in Fremont, with his laptop open and a genuine smile on his face. The consulting retainer from Vertex provided comfortable income without the soul-crushing hours. He'd taken on 2 other clients, smaller trading firms that appreciated his expertise and treated him with respect. For the first time in years, Marcus worked reasonable hours, took weekends off, and remembered what it felt like to exist outside of code. Maya had come home for spring break, and they'd spent an entire Saturday hiking in the Cascades, something Marcus hadn't done since college. She'd noticed the change in him immediately. "You seem lighter," she'd said, balancing on a fallen log across a creek. "Like someone lifted a weight off your shoulders." "I got fired," Marcus had replied, which made her nearly fall off the log in shock. He'd explained everything over sandwiches at the summit, the midnight termination, the platform collapse, the triumphant return as a consultant. Maya had listened with wide eyes, then hugged him fiercely. "I'm proud of you," she said, "not for saving them, for saving yourself." Now, working in Carmen's coffee shop with the comfortable hum of conversation around him, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. His phone buzzed with a message from Leo, who'd been promoted to senior developer and was thriving under Marcus's remote mentorship. Platform hit 99.98% efficiency today. New record. Thanks for teaching us how to listen to it instead of just commanding it. Marcus smiled and typed back, "That's all you, Leo. You're a natural." The coffee shop door opened, and David Chun walked in, Marcus's MIT classmate, who'd offered him the San Francisco position months ago. They'd stayed in touch, and David had made the trip to Seattle specifically to meet up. "Marcus." David embraced him warm. "If you like the story, please subscribe to our channel." Marcus Webb, a brilliant software engineer, is abruptly fired at 3 a.m. from Vertex Capital after 4 years of building their proprietary trading platform. The termination comes via email with no explanation, just as his stock options are about to vest. He discovers he's been replaced by Dr. Amanda Ramirez from Goldman Sachs. Facing financial pressure and a restrictive non-compete clause, Marcus is offered generous severance in exchange for his silence. Days later, the platform begins failing under new management. After Vertex loses $47 million, a desperate Richard Castellano begs Marcus to return. Marcus agrees, but only as a highly paid consultant. He stabilizes the system, secures his vested equity, and leaves on his terms. 3 months later, Marcus thrives as an independent consultant, working reasonable hours while mentoring his former team remotely, finally achieving work-life balance and peace.